Panel 3, and we're going to kind of go to a quick video. The third panel is wildfire suppression, to call it that. We have the folks on the ground, we have the folks in the air, and we have the folks that make the stuff that put the fire out. But you're all familiar with the Paradise Fire, and the man coming on to moderate this is very passionate for his constituents and dealing with the fire. I don't know anyone more passionate about this issue than Congressman Doug LaMalfa. But before we go to the panel, well, let's roll the last of the EarthX videos, the deadliest fire in California history.
The forests and the new communities in them were becoming a ticking time bomb. In 2018, that bomb went off. The deadliest fire in California's history hit the rural town of Paradise, California. 86 people perished.
The lead agency to continue to handle fires, so until that changes, I think they need to become, a quality partner, and that comes down to, like it's been mentioned, on the boots on the ground side, doing away with this LPTA and this emergency response side of these incidents and contracting. The contracts aren't long-term. There's no incentive to reinvest. The contracts at the most are 5 years. And even the folks on the ground, we need longer-term contracts. We need a partner who believes in us. We're continuing to fight that fight to be seen as an equal on the ground, regardless of the color of our NOMEX. And so I think that's what we're seeing, and my members of our association, which represent, 20,000 firefighters, 14,000 pieces of equipment, and on average, at least 60% of the resources that are putting the fire out. And we're still struggling to get the ear of the agency to understand that we need changes in the contract. We're here to support, we're here to help. And we do continue to get excuses. The last one in Boise last week was they're needing, more base funding for the contracting officers. That's the ask they have. We've got, $200 million just allocated in fuels work last week, I saw went out. But the contracting officers, there's not enough contracting officers to push that work through.
You mean these are the pencil pushers?
Yeah, contracting officers, yeah. And to get to, Jeff made a really good comment in the first panel too about interrupting the cycle of fire. And if we're going to interrupt the cycle of fire, the Forest Service has to utilize private industry, utilize the landowners, an additional 800 pieces of equipment or 800 firefighters. If all the tools to solve this problem are in this room right here.
You would say interrupting that would mean how the land is basically strategy on the land, how you can interrupt the flow of fire.
Doing the fuels reduction, we have to do the fuels reduction work fast enough to actually make a difference in a timely manner. Okay. And we have the resources.
Yeah, again, I'm John Gould, President and CEO of 10 Tanker Air Carrier. I think the question was, why is this a federal government issue? And I think that from...
What's the role supposed to be?
Yeah, so from our perspective, the federal government has the most land. They utilize an incredible number of resources every year, not the least of which is their aviation resources. And I think from where we stand, we have opportunities for contracts with not only the federal government, but with lots of state governments. We prefer to contract with the Forest Service. We think they're good partners in spite of all the issues that are happening with contracting, and they continue to happen with contracting. But what they do for us, and what we appreciate, is that they take their resources, because they're forced to, and they push them to where the fires are. When I contract for the state of California or the state of Colorado or the state of California, they want to keep us there. Fires flow around the country, and it makes sense to to take resources that are as large, as capable, as fast as the aviation resources that I think myself and my contracting partners bring to the table, and contract them to the Forest Service to get them where they're needed the most. Do we have enough of them? We don't think so. Are there ways we can get more? Yes, there are. And do those, is it a contracting issue? In a way, it's a funding issue and a contracting issue, but these are things that I think can be solved that, you know, we need to work on with help from our congressional delegations. And, you know, I think that the number of resources that we bring to bear in 2023 are probably enough to take care of the situation, but we're not incentivized to add more or to modernize our resources, you know, as we go through, just because, as we say, the contracting problems. So
Longer-term contracts, a little more certainty would be big, is what I'm gathering so far. Yeah.
longer-term contracts, I'm not, you know, as they were talking 10-year contracts, it's hard for me as a little tiny business to look out 10 years. I think longer contracts during the fire season, you know, we're constantly being brought on late, let off early. But I also think that we're slaves to the CWN contracts, that the Forest Service isn't given enough budgeted money to contract for enough exclusive use contracts, and that kills me. I have half of my fleet that has never had an exclusive use contract, and so they bring me on late and lay me off early. And as someone pointed out earlier, I have an infrastructure that I have to support that will fly 4 DC-10s any time of the year, all year long. So when I get a
And we hear
month's
there's
worth of-
hesitation to contract, what do you call them, the VLAPs?
Yes.
I don't even understand that. Sir, let's move on to Jennifer here. We'll keep going through the questions, and thank you. And after this, we members of this caucus and the appropriate committees would be happy to meet with you more and drill down on some of these things and put it into the legislation, put it into the appropriations, whatever it takes, because you know we're as frustrated as you probably, although you're very cool up here on this panel today, as you may well be. Jennifer, go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Jennifer Drawn, Neptune Aviation. We operate 9 BAE 146 large air tankers, and we've been in the business for going on 30 years now. So we've seen a lot of changes over the years, and we've seen a lot of things that haven't changed, and we've already heard about contracting. We are here to partner with the Forest Service. We've seen changes. We've seen things improve, albeit slowly. We are here to partner with aerial firefighting industry to come as a united voice to work with Congress and to help move things forward in terms of exclusive use contracts, in terms of the things that John already mentioned. And really just like we've already talked about, the Forest Service has the largest amount of acres, and we know that they're our partner, and we know what their role is. And we also want to point out that healthy land management and suppression, they're not in opposition, right? There's long-term and there's short-term. We have catastrophic wildfire seasons. Suppression needs to be talked about more and needs to be supported more. So thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Eddie Goldberg with Perimeter Solutions. We've been providing long-term fire retardant, partnering with agencies in the U.S. and around the world for the last 60 years. You know, I think we can all agree that investments in forest management, mitigation are critically important for the future, but I think we can probably also agree that these are things that are going to take decades to really start changing the landscape. And we've got today's fires, tomorrow's fires to prevent and to fight, and we've got to put effort into that. And I think we're also seeing, at least over the last 10 or 15 years, that those fire seasons, fire years, fires are getting much worse. And I think in order to do that, we've got to have an environment where we've got a safe, sustainable, and growing aerial firefighting infrastructure. And you know, some of the issues that have come up with other panelists, and I would defer to John and Jennifer on some of the details, I think there's changes that need to be made in the way that we look at our aerial firefighting infrastructure to make it safe, sustainable, and growing into the future. could be contracting, could be the way that things are specified in requirements. Because if we continue the way we are, there's going to be less incentive to have those fleets growing, and we will lose the ability to support growing firefighting activities.
Okay, thank you. That's one pass through, everybody. Appreciate it. Let me ask this one to everybody on the panel that wants to touch on this one. You don't all have to. With the Farm Bill upon us here, on everybody's mind, as we're working on that, and Ag Committee, of course, and U.S. Forest Service is a component of the USDA. Could you talk a bit about the forestry title, and if there's any specific programs within that that deserve a closer look as we go into this? So anybody wishes to touch on that piece. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yes, sir.
Sure, real quickly, you know, I think that bill goes through what we see. This is a suppression panel up here, so we're all, I think, focused on fire suppression. From our suppression world, we see a lot of money being obligated to fuels and prescribed fire. We think, you know, there's a program that's absolutely necessary, but that takes 30 to 40 years before you'll see the payoff. I think that what we see, and ask any firefighter that's on the ground today that doesn't get the wage that he deserves, there's not an equal amount of money being focused on the suppression side. And I would say if there's anything that needs to be done is to balance those two things between the fuels and prescribed fire and the suppression side, and pay as much attention to the suppression side as you do with the fuels and prescribed fire.
Okay, well, we're working on that pay scale. We've got a bill on that. So let me ask this one on this. Are the fire suppression tools that are currently available to the U.S. Forest Service adequate? And I think I would ask not just quantity or maybe length of contract, which, you know, reiterate that if you want, but the type of tools, are they modern enough tools? Are they effective enough broadly with what we deal with today? And everybody or anybody on the panel?
Well, I'll speak for a moment to our tools, and Mark Ray touched on the fact that, you know, maybe longer contracts, John did too, but in order to support taking some of the risk off of contractors in terms of financial risk and investment risk and heavy capital investment in modernizing, the longer term contracts is key to that.
Okay.
Yeah, I can talk from a retardant standpoint. You know, I would say we've spent many, many years innovating not just the products and services that we provide, and the products that we provide today really don't look anything like they did years and years ago. They're safer, more effective, environmentally friendly than they've ever been. As much as the products, though, we've been investing in infrastructure and capability. The transition from the older air tankers that we saw 20 years ago to today's more modern fleet, and what will be even more modern going forward, requires a lot more infrastructure to be able to support loading these airplanes faster, loading multiple airplanes at one time, making sure that we've got infrastructure and distribution in place so that we never miss loading an air tanker. When an air tanker pulls into the pit, 24, well, I guess you don't operate 24 hours a day, but 365 days a year, we're always there to load it, and we can do that in short notice when these air tanker bases only have enough inventory to last about one day. So it's not just investment in innovation and products, but it's the services that we provide that make these fleets much more effective.
I'd like to echo on that.
Oh, please, go ahead.
I think we've noticed in a lot of areas the extension of fire season. And facilities, just like Ed Goldberg mentioned, originally, you know, we started dealing with fire seasons that were 90 days, 100 days long. And now in several areas, you're seeing fire seasons that are measured months. In fact, in California, they're year-long fire seasons. So the infrastructure is a critical discussion here, because the infrastructure, firefighting infrastructure, is based on a shorter fire season. And things have changed over the last decade, and so there are longer fire seasons. The infrastructure and the financing has not kept up with that. So now we're seeing and staying at air tanker bases and using facilities for a lot longer periods of time without any change of maintenance and funding and realization that this is more of a full-time job than it ever has been. So it's one of the challenges that we face.
Yeah, and I think in terms of, does the agency have enough resources? Do they have what they need? They clearly don't. I mean, I know on the private side, our utilization has gone through the roof on an annual basis. The mental health of our firefighters is taking a toll. The suicide rate, we were just at the Wildland Firefighter Foundation. It's amazing how many young men and women are killing themselves in the off season. Due to the stresses of this job, and we need to look at innovative ways to help fight fire, and we joke about it, but we're still, in our contracts anyways, we're still required to use Pulaskis and shovels.
What?
Pulaskis and shovels, some of the basic hand tools, and not that those don't work in certain situations, but the way the mechanism is they're stifling us in our ability to get new equipment out. We have members that have some of the most top-notch logging equipment in the world that can fight fire amazingly, and it's not being able to be utilized. We have dozers sitting, like we heard from the gentleman in Oregon, when it doesn't have to be that way. So we need to continue to innovate, even on the boots on the ground side of things.
Yeah, that is indeed very frustrating to hear, but they don't take advantage of the equipment that's nearby. That's I alluded to the Viper program, which refers to private equipment that people can contract with ahead of time. Well, last couple of years, I mean, the COVID era was a giant waste. We didn't get those done, we're doing COVID training. Like, well, hell, the fire season's still coming, So why don't I call upon Aiden Ansari. Are you in the room? Okay, come over to that microphone there, please. We're going to ask for you to give us a couple minutes on your topic. Aiden is with the National Mobile Shower and Catering Association, and so we'll ask you to weigh in on wildfire base camps, which are obviously really important, so our firefighters have their needs met. So tell us for about 2 minutes about the regulatory issues, policy issues, or challenges that you're seeing to be able to get your job done for our Forest Service firefighters. Heat it up? Not yet. Would you throw him that one, Ed? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Aideen Ansari. I represent the National Mobile Shower and Catering Association. We provide the services.
Sorry, I mispronounced that. Aideen?
Aideen. It's spelled Aiden, A-I-D-I-N.
Okay.
We do, again, we provide the services for your folks, and I'm hearing a lot of the same things from you guys. The issues that you guys are having are the same issues that we're all having. It's contracting. I don't know when contracting decided to go with the lowest price technically acceptable contracts. I don't think that this is a way for us to innovate, to reinvest in our companies, hire and train new people. It doesn't work, and it's not working, and I'm surprised to hear that from the folks in the helicopter group, that is also how their contracts are written. It's lowest price technically acceptable. I don't think we want to have the cheapest aircrafts flying around or the cheapest showers on the provided for your crews. We can't do that. Contracting has to understand that they've got a huge asset with all of us in the industry, and we just want to partner with them. We want to help them, but they're not allowing us to innovate or help. I think longer contracts are great, but I'm not going to beat the dead horse here, but it is a contracting issue, and I wish that we had an opportunity to speak to these folks that were from the Forest Service about these contracting issues. They need to get more creative on how they're doing this and not the cheapest. Here's an example. I'm based out of Central Oregon. I was dispatched to a fire because I was much cheaper than the competitor that was in Reno. I went to a fire in Reno We drove all night to get to Reno to serve 5 meals and turn around and come back. When there was a contractor sitting there, but based on their
Five
algorithm.
meals for 5 people, or
No, there was
a period of 5
5 meals. Yeah, breakfast, lunch, dinner, breakfast. We're out of there.
for about how many workers?
450.
Yeah. You hear that on dozers and things like that. They're bringing a dozer from freaking Tennessee or something when you got
Yeah.
one in Red Bluff, and
So these are the kinds of things that we are seeing, and like I said, the infrastructure I think is in place. I think the contracting becomes stronger, and more solid contracts where we can go out there and reinvest in our companies and provide the horsepower that the Forest Service needs.
Okay, thank you. Ideen, hang tight right there. If you can keep that mic, and maybe Jennifer and Ed share on that end for further questions. And how we doing, Daryl? One more to go around? I better pick a good one then. Okay. So appreciate you panelists here for. So when we look out into the future, you want to see 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. What issues are just over the horizon on this topic that Congress needs to be looking at? Not that we don't have enough worried about right now for this coming year or the following 2 years, but what do you think, how can we get ahead of the curve somehow 10 years out, 5 years out, like that? What springs to mind on, again, our deal is working with Forest Service to help take care of federal lands and not have them negatively affect the private lands or whatever state lands might be involved that are nearby. I'm not here to tell the private sector how they should do their lands, but we always have suggestions. But anyway, so take it away. Let's start at the far end here, since you could bring it home.
Let me just go back to something I said a couple minutes ago. I think the ability to support firefighting into the future is going to be based on changing the way that we do business to support safe, sustainable, long-term growing aerial firefighting assets. And I don't believe we are there today. I mean, you've heard a lot of problems. They seem to be similar across multiple parts of the firefighting industry in terms of how we contract, how we set requirements, how we do business. In order for us 5 years from now to be able to fight fire the way that we're able to do that today, the industry is going to have to look quite a bit different in how we do business, from a length of contracting, the structure of these contracts, the way that requirements are set, et cetera, or there'll really be no incentive for the industry to keep up with the growth. I would say one thing, and you guys can agree or disagree with me, but a 1-year contract with 4 one-year option years is not a 5-year contract. So even when we talk about long-term contracting, we're not really talking about long-term contracting. So it's a more complicated problem than just saying we need 5-year or 10-year contracts. We need to move away from LPTA when we're talking about resources that affect lives and property. We need to have true multi-year contracts, and we have to have realistic requirements so that we can all meet those in a cost-effective way.
It's not unlike what we hear on the mill side of it. If we're going to encourage people to build the mill infrastructure so we can process timber and help with the forestry management problem, they have to have long-term commitments to, why would you build a $100 million mill and only have 1 or 2 or 3 years? You got to have a 30-year commitment. You got to know you're going to be able to take logs out of a regional area reasonably for enough years to pay back the mill. And it sounds like a similar vein. Jennifer?
Right, I won't repeat, but echo what Eddie said. And I'd also
You got to get it through our heads here.
Okay. Say it 7 times, right?
They tell us in campaigns you got to introduce yourself with 11 pieces of mail to get people to know who you are. So
I would just also like to mention the communication piece between all of industry and the Forest Service, and if we could just keep that dialogue going and actually have it, see it affect the effect of the dialogue. For example, if we know as industry what we are the subject matter experts, and we would like to be there to help the Forest Service, specifically in certain areas. For example, in contracting, but also in the field and also in fleet size. advice on that, rather than see a study done by the Forest Service, and that impacts us without having our input as industry.
Yeah, imagine, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with what those guys say. They hit the major points. I think that trying to find a way to make contracting more reliable for us. I know that every one of us here who has a contract knows the difference between budgeted money and suppression funding. And, suppression funding is always there. Why can't we get contracts that are long-term contracts based off suppression funding like we do off of budgeted funding? So, if I saw a change that would come in the next 5 years that would change our industry, it would be to allow the Forest Service to fund our contracts, all of our contracts, with suppression funding. They do it with warehouses, they do it a lot of ways, and charge it back to the fire when the fire occurs. They should be able to do that and to make their contracting system healthy and whole. So that's my thought.
Let me jump to Ideen here. Did you have something before we close the panel on the stage? Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think all of our members would agree with everything that's being said. We're all in the same boat trying to solve the same problem. And, the boots on the ground folks, we want to be good partners. And that's a lot of what this comes down to in every conversation I hear, no matter what sector of the suppression world you're in, is communication. The agency doesn't respect our expertise when we've been doing it longer than they have. And so, but what I do see on a positive note, Doug, and what's happening, at least from the Forest Health side, this money that's coming down, there's a lot of money coming for fuels reduction. The work's, I do believe the work's gonna get out there. I think that it's, in the end, I think we are gonna see a healthier forest. I think we can work through these contract issues, but, I know as a whole, private industry can solve this problem. We just need some things to get out of the way.
I say that frequently. We have to engage a lot more in the private sector for thinning our lands as well as the suppression side of it. The Forest Service is never going to keep up at the pace that they do anything, unfortunately. So, wholeheartedly agree. All right, bring us home.
Okay, thank you. So I actually see two challenges, a short-term and a long-term one. The short-term challenge is we talk about landscape treatments, with the 1 million acre treatment year, the 10 million acre treatment goals, and we don't realize how many calendar years that's going to really take. It's going to take a long time to build up that expertise. And the challenge that you have as land managers and private landowners is, what do you do in the interim? You don't hear anybody talking about, how are we going to plug that gap? Do we change our initial attack policies? What type of organization do we manage to make sure that we don't continue to experience the catastrophic fires that we have in the last several years? And that's an area that we really need to address. We cannot just look to the future. We have to look to the situation we're in. And I believe aerial firefighting is a very important part, a component of successful initial attacks and keeping the catastrophic fires down if properly managed. On the 10-year side, on the long-term side, we've talked about technology. Technology is key to giving the taxpayer the best bang for their buck, to create a more efficient, a safer fire suppression workforce and objectives. And so what we need is, again, an open partnership and a receptive federal agency, both interior and agriculture, into the new technologies that the private sector brings in. Again, 95% of aerial firefighting comes from the private sector. The folks up here representing the technology, they have a lot to offer. The question is how receptive are the agencies to that new technology? So right now, there's a lot of benefit to gain from the expertise from the private sector. We just need to open those communications and have the agencies to be far more receptive to some of our ideas. After all, the Pulaskis that my friend Jess mentioned were invented in 1910 and still a requirement of firefighting today. So we can do better, and we should do better. Thank you.
Let me wedge in on that. These time flies when we're having so much fun here, but when we're talking about technology, we're talking about more on the aircraft side, night flying would be a possible tool. And I don't know how much of that, I can't say how much is done now. I know there's a big kibosh on doing much of it, being able to fly through smoky situations, and I'm not trying to belittle the safety factor, but would that technology help us to have more variety of time we can be flying aircraft and through conditions that are currently seen as unacceptable. You want to touch on that quick? Whoever, I mean, real fast. I mean,
Absolutely, real
Daryl's
quick.
going to kill me, but you know,
So,
I am passionate
so
about this.
night vision brings a whole component to fire suppression. Again, right now, aerial firefighting is, except in certain cases, Orange County, for example, is sequestered to the daylight hours. As we get technology that Jennifer and John's group is bringing into us, there's a tremendous capability, particularly on the helicopter side, of fighting fire 24/7. So think about it. So it really expands that envelope when we can be effective. And fire is generally more conducive to being controlled and contained during the nighttime hours when humidity comes up and the daytime temperatures aren't high. So they're doing it in Australia. There's several programs. The Forest Service has kind of gone in and out of that a few times. Represents a tremendous potential with the technology. It's improving all the time.
Just real quick, we're actually doing that in Orange County with Orange County Fire Authority with their quick reaction force, where we support a number of helicopters that fly 24 hours a day, including nighttime retardant operations. Now, it's a pilot program. It's got a long way to go before it's really institutionalized, but you know, that along with better tools to be able to map fires even at night and through smoke, I think that technology could develop over time.
But that's a local authority. You don't have somebody from the federal saying you can't do it, stopping you.
No, it's just the Orange County Fire.
Yeah, we need to be looking really hard at that. So, well, panelists, I really appreciate it. Thank you. And the ideas we talk about today in this compacted amount of time, we want to hear about. Put it on paper for us, and let's walk through how we can improve the technology, improve contracting, improve the long-term, long-term effects, the long-term ability to do business, and grab this federal government entities by the shoulders and get it done. Because the people out there, I know in my district, are sick of it, and you are all busting your tails trying to make it happen. Why do we have these artificial impediments just set by a bureaucracy that's, maybe taking a couple years off or what have you to dictate how we live in our rural areas? And there's people in the urban areas. The LA Times asking questions like, well, why should we rebuild these communities? Why do these folks even got to live up there in those mountains? Like, well, because the stuff you get are people like those loggers, those miners, those farmers, ranchers that make that stuff so you'll have it. And that's something they need to be reminded. Just because you got to shut down and we're importing everything doesn't mean we can't do it right and better than anywhere else in the world. So all of you that have attended and been part of this, we're grateful for you, and we want to be strong partners. And so that's what the Western Caucus Foundation and our members are all about, as well as our committee members on the pertinent committees that on the official side. So we appreciate you, and I'm honored to be able to run this panel today for my our good chairman Dan Newhouse, who has a lot of feet and a lot of fires here today too as well. So I'm glad I could help run this for him. So thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you all being here. Thanks, everybody who joined us on the panels. Congressman LaMalfa. Reception tonight, 5:30, 1334 Longworth. You should all know that. You should have all received it. If not, I hope to see you there. And again, look forward to seeing you at a new Western Caucus Foundation event in the future. Thanks. Good.